Hello, welcome to another Melbourne AWS user group. We're at 116 now, I believe, something like that. Yep. So, hi, hello, welcome. I'm all over the shop with my notes tonight, and now I'm dropping stuff. This is going great. So thank you everybody for coming. If you're here in person or if you're watching on the live stream, thank you for joining us. If you're watching on delay as well, thank you for coming along. Before I forget completely where I'm at, let's go to some slides so that I have a prompt. I'm on the wrong side. Nope, this way. One day we'll figure it out. So in the spirit of reconciliation, the Melbourne AWS user group acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. we pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So this is what we're all here for, not here to hear me talk. We've got two great presentations lined up tonight. Before that, though, we run through our usual What's New in AWS segment with Ian and Matt. And then after that, we'll have David and then Dawn taking us through some great presentations. We'll do our little marketplace segment, the Who's Hiring bit, at the end, just before we close, so that you've got a great opportunity to connect and meet people. And we'll go from there. So just some etiquette things as how we run the night. Please hold all questions if you're in the room until the end, just so that we don't interrupt our speakers, and it also gives us a better opportunity to make sure the microphone gets around to everybody, as well as give anybody watching on the live stream the opportunity to participate. If you are watching on the live stream, here is how you can get involved and ask questions. If you're on our Slack, the best way is in the Melbourne channel or in the general channel or anywhere else on Slack, really. Doesn't matter, we'll find you. Or if you're watching there on YouTube, you can ask questions in the YouTube chat as well. And myself or Ian or somebody else will ask the questions on your behalf when we get to that bit. Just a reminder, when we're dealing with questions and throughout the night, we do run our events under a code of conduct. The basic blurb is on the screen there, but the full thing is available on the website. If you do have any code of conduct concerns, please feel free to reach out to myself or anybody you see up here tonight during the introduction bit. And I believe there's a form as well for anonymous feedback on the website if you prefer. So a big thank you to our sponsors, without whom we could not put these events on. So our gold sponsor for 2022 is CMD. Yeah, you can clap. They make these events possible, so we definitely couldn't do it without their help. And our silver sponsors, Versant and Cevo. And to NAB for offering us this venue it's a pretty spectacular venue, really, and putting us up here every month. So I mentioned Slack before. Slack is the best way to stay in touch with the community. There's about 900 or so members on the Slack channel now. So it really is a great place to be involved. We do have a couple of the main channels up there. If you have questions, you can ask, the usual thing on in the general channel. It's a great place to get help for stuff. There's also jobs channels for volunteers, and then for outages and announcements and other things like that as well, which are also very amusing at times, depending on what announcement drops or what outage is going on. If you'd like to get involved, we're always looking for speakers. The hardest part of putting these events on is finding people willing to contribute. So if you have a topic, big or small, that you'd like to talk about, doesn't have to be a presentation deck that you've spent 10 hours or 12 hours putting content together. It could literally be a 5-minute lightning talk about something, a nice tool that you found or something like that. And we're more than happy to help get you on your way as well if you need a bit of mentoring. We think we're opening for sponsorship again soon. Yep. The COVID pool of money has finally run out now that we're running events in person again. So we will be looking for sponsors soon. You can probably reach out to Ian or Matt about that one if you have any questions or are interested. And we're always looking for volunteers. Like, there's a lot of setup that needs to be done on month-to-month basis. So always looking for help with that as well. So what else is going on in the AWS space before I hand over? Just a reminder that the registration has opened for reInvent. If you plan to go in person or not, you can still register to be involved. I think we did a bit of a show of hands last time to see who's going. Does anybody actually wanting to go to Vegas this year? That's more than I thought. And maybe the world's getting a bit safer again. But cool, that'll be good to see a good Melbourne contingent going over this year. I'll be watching on the live streams though, so if anybody wants to stay in Melbourne with me, that's fine. We can do that. A bit closer to home, next week I think it is. Yeah, next Tuesday, the ANZ AWS database meetup is on. That's an online one, but still run here for Melbourne, or here in this region of the world, I guess is probably a better way to put it. And they're doing about migrating Oracle to RDS. The week after that, I think it's the week after that, yep. The Programming and Tools meetup is on. The venue is a bit of TBD at the moment, but they're talking about AWS step functions and business process orchestration with Derek. And I think Dawn has a bit more to add about that. Yeah.
Actually working. Excellent.
Yep.
Yes, Programming and Tools meetup for a couple more months is still my baby, and NAB have very kindly been able to offer us a venue from August onwards. However, they've not been able to offer us a venue for July due to construction. So if you work for a company that is able to provide a venue for that sort of event, we're on the 13th of July, which is a Wednesday at 5:30. Please do come and find me. Obviously, we've put feelers out around the place, but we're very, very keen to get back to doing the Programming and Tools events in person. So if you are able to facilitate that venue for July, just please find me at the end. We can have a chat about that.
Cool. Thank you, Dawn. Also on Wednesday, the week after, is the Melbourne Serverless meetup. So you might have to pick and choose your favorites on this one. But it's their first in-person event back in 2 years, and they're at the Mentor Group office. Something like that. Cool, I think that's all the slides that I have, so I'll get out of the way and we'll get on with the show. So first up, we'll have the news segment with Ian and Matt.
Cool. We don't have slides yet. So slides are coming. In the meantime, it was a quiet month. This is all the news.
Lot going on.
Yep, it was working. There's not that much on the first couple of slides, so I'll just read them out to you. As always, we'll start with finally in Sydney. In this case, it is all about Connect, which has forecasting, capacity planning, and scheduling. And in a good bit of scheduling, I've got Matt here, who actually knows Connect, so he can tell all about this.
Yeah, Connect's one of my babies. So forecasting, capacity planning, and scheduling. Does anybody actually use Connect with, like, in any real anger? Yeah, it's about the number I'd expect. That's look, really important functionality for those who actually run contact centers. But yeah, not much. We're still waiting for, basic functionality like, infrastructure as code support. But, apparently that's coming.
Okay, you just did the thing that sometimes crashes my laptop.
Oh.
Like now.
Oh, you killed it. You killed it. We know AWS, we don't know laptops.
Cool. Continuing without slides. On the serverless section, I've got really sad news. The only serverless thing that was released was EMR serverless. And there is pretty much a debate whether that should be called serverless or not.
Yeah.
AWS says, yes, it is a serverless service.
It's not.
Everybody else seems to say it's not.
In containers, little bit more going on, but not much. We had the announcement of Lightsail containers can now use ECR private repositories. For those of you who are using Lightsail, which I'm going to guess is about as many people as we use in Connect. Bottle Rocket ECS for NVIDIA GPUs. Again, anybody using Bottle Rocket? Yep. Again, very useful announcement. And Margate support for logging with FluentBit.
Yeah, that's supposed to be Fargate. And somebody made a typo there.
Okie dokie. FluentBit support. Yay. Again, everybody from last month knows my position when it comes to anything, Prometheus or Kubernetes.
Yeah. Just a little bit more detail on that one. It's already supported FluentBit. This is FluentBit multi-line support. Apparently, Fargate cuts off lines of logging at about 16K. If you have very big logs, it can now actually handle that, which is nice. Then on the DevOps side, we've got Code Whisperer. Code Whisperer is, well, you've probably heard of things like GitHub Copilot, which automatically creates code for you. This is like that, but just for AWS services. It doesn't do the rest of your application.
Yay! We have slides.
We have slides. Well,
They're not the ones we're looking at on the laptop, but...
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Rob. That means we can also read them from here.
Sweet.
But yeah, it seems like a nice way to get going with services you don't know. I don't know how useful it's going to be long term as a service. It's currently in preview. I signed up for the preview, but I haven't heard back from AWS yet whether or not I get access. Could be fun.
I think it's going to be a very, AWS V1 service where it's going to be a little hit and miss for a while.
Probably.
But we'll wait and see.
It will work for uploading S3 buckets.
I'm sure it will work with S3 buckets.
Yeah. Cool. Another really nice one, though, is Session Manager natively supporting port forwarding. So basically, this allows you to do something that in the past you could sort of put together as a hack, but now through the console and everything, use Session Manager to connect to an RDS, for example. Really useful, really nice.
Just takes what you were doing and makes it a lot more streamlined. So just another one of those quality of life improvements.
Yep. Anything more you want to discuss from this?
No, there wasn't really anything else. Yeah, update to AMS, cool. The Elastic Disaster Recovery, multi-staging for target accounts. That's potentially got some interesting parts to it. But yeah, again, wait and see.
Yep. So next slide, please. Cool.
WAF capture.
Yep.
That's, yeah.
Great. We can all do now, instead of just training Google's AI, we can also train the AWS AI.
Yay.
By selecting which photo actually has a car on it.
Or a crosswalk or a chimney.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. More interesting, possibly, is Control Tower updates. For those of us using Control Tower in any form.
Yeah. I'm sure Dawn's going to have a comment to make about that at some stage. Surely there's going to be an updated presentation at some stage. And then, of course, we've got the obligatory config support for more resource types and more checks. Config updates, cloud and guard duty updates feel like they're every month kind of thing at about this point in time.
Yep. And I warned you at the start, it's not a busy month. That's why there's not a lot of exciting things here. Maybe there's more on the last slide.
Oh, I think there is. There's more Connect.
More Connect. So
that's what we need in life, is more Connect. See, it's an unloved service. Connect, outbound campaigns. You can now officially use Amazon Connect to harass many millions of people by automating outbound SMS and call campaigns. That's nice. Use it responsibly. I am sure they've got some systems in place to control abuse of that service. Connect Cases is also in preview. That's, again, not going to be overly useful for people not using the full contact center suite, but basically it's a way for you to do case management in Connect without having to leverage a ServiceNow or a Salesforce type application. Is it going to be used in production? Probably not.
Ringing endorsement.
Yeah. The outbound campaigns, I'll be doing a session on that in the next couple of months. I can see a lot of fun we can have with that.
Cool. Everybody be careful about giving your details to Matt, or you might get some unwanted outbound campaigns.
Oh, everybody wants a phone call at 3 a.m.
Cool. At the top, you can also see some new instances. Not very exciting ones. It's the D variants of the M6i, of the 6i instances. That basically means they've got an NVMe SSD attached. I think it is 7.6 or 7.8 terabyte.
Terabyte, yeah.
Gigabyte seems a bit small these days. And we also have the P4DE GPU instances in preview. In case you're not aware of the whole letter soup, the D basically means it has an NVMe storage attached. The E means it is extra of whatever it's supposed to be. Yeah, I know.
I remember when this was simple. Yeah.
So
now we're four characters long and counting.
Yep.
Improved UI for budget, because that was what we needed. Prettier looking bills. Does that make me less sad when I get a bill? Maybe. I don't know. Comes off the credit card automatically.
Yep. And Aura supports Postgres 14. I'm sure that is useful to a lot of people. And there's also IoT Express Link, but I honestly can't remember what that was about. It was not...
I think it's private connectivity for IoT devices, something, private APNs. Yeah. Made an impact, obviously.
Yeah. I remember it was mentioned at reInvent. And yeah, that's about all. And
that was about it for the month.
I know we all hoped for more. Let's hope there's more interesting stuff next month. Maybe some actual serverless stuff.
Maybe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I haven't actually spoken to our first presenter. Are you here, David?
David is...
Yep. Come on up. Push and hold.
Yep.
Hold for longer.
Yeah, I was
Thank you. All right, let's see if we can actually get your slides working. Just hang on a moment for me. Oh, I think we actually have it. Hey, that worked. Awesome news. Yeah, hang on a sec. All right. Yep, cool.
Cool.
Thank you. Oh. Oh, okay. I've got updated, but I don't have it over here.
In the meantime, can everyone see me and hear me? Just
Yay!
old habits from online. Can everyone see me and hear me well? Just double checking. Cool. So yeah, as you can see from the presentation, it will be about security. I'm a security guy. I'll try and make it a little bit interesting so you guys aren't bored to death and are not sleeping in the middle of the presentation. So bear with me, no promises. Cool, so let's talk about security in AWS a little bit. But before, a little bit of myself, if you are interested. So I'm currently working for CMD. I'm lead security consultant in there. I have all that years of experience, if you guys care. I do hold some certifications. Some of them expired. I have to do it again. Hopefully soon. So yeah, outside of my security boring work, I also like machine learning and AI, crypto, blockchain, all those new fancy technologies. Pretty cool. I also really love motorsports. As you can see from one of the pictures there, I have my own racing simulator, and I'm getting good. One day I'll be able to afford a real proper race car. Not yet. I'll have one of those green Lambos. Yep. I also a blog and a speaker. I try to do these often, but with COVID and everything, it's not the same doing online. I didn't really like it, but I've tried to post as much as I can on Medium, LinkedIn, and all those other blog platforms. And hopefully, with this meetup and a few other meetups, go back to presenting and be involved in the community. What else? Another curiosity about me, I'm also a black belt in a Korean martial arts called Hapkido. So I'm like a full security guy. If I need, I can be like a security guard in case everything goes wrong. I have this in my sleeve. Also, like, as you can imagine, a big nerd, really Star Wars fans, really big Star Wars fans. 3D printing, Dungeons and Dragons, all those cool things. And I'm also a cat person. There's also one picture of one of my cats. My face is in front of it. But it's this is one of my partners to help troubleshoot code. If something goes wrong, I'll call him and he will help me figure out where is my bugs and issues. So in apologies for that fancy slides. I have to stare most of my day, every day on Google Slides. So I was Googling something different to change it a little bit. It's a little bit weird, I have to admit. But anyway, it's not Google Slides. Cool, so let's jump into it. I'm in CMD and doing consulting. I have worked with quite a lot of companies from all different sizes, all different industries. And every time when I go to recommend something new or uplift their security capabilities or do something different, I usually will face one of those three challenges, or all of three. Usually, companies they really want it or they require be compliant with a specific standard. So, for example, government in Australia, they need to comply with IRAP and ISM. Banking needs to comply with APRA in Australia, and maybe PCI, depending what they are doing for credit card information, and a few others. And European customers, for example, they need to handle GDPR and other standards. And every time I go to a company, I'll see one of those three. Either they want to do it, but they don't have the people to do it. They don't have the money to do it, or they don't have time to do it. It's always one of those missing, or all of them at once. So yeah, regardless of the size of the company, even the big companies, the big banks, the big enterprises, the big retail, they usually lack people that have this knowledge to actually put this in place and add new stuff. Usually, especially in the security space, most security professionals, they are very closed-minded and still bound to the past and try to do the same old school things over and over and over. And that doesn't really work on AWS and cloud environments in general most of the time. There are similar ways to do it. There's some things that you don't need to worry, and they keep going there for the sake of they want to be across or because it's the only thing they know. Go figure. So yeah, that's one big problem. Also, there's the cost factor. Security can be expensive. So if, for example, just to give a quick example, if you are looking for a CM or a SOAR solution, just centralize all your login in one place and have these fancy alerting capabilities and nice dashboards and machine learning powered to have insights and everything in one place, it could cost you 7 digits or even more. Let's say, let's name a few names: IBM, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, and a few others. It can get you like 7 digits. Yes, some big companies, they have this money, but can you imagine a company like a small startup with 7 people paying like $1 million for Splunk, for example, for have an absurd amount of log ingestion? That doesn't really work. So what do? If you need to comply because you are a fintech startup, you need to work with credit card. How you handle that if you don't have the money to start with it? And the last one, we don't have time. We have the audit coming in 2 months, and we need to be ISO 27000 compliant. How we do that? Long story short, you don't, but that's a different issue. How you get at least on that path to get in the, maybe you fail 1 or 2 audits, but the next one you get it. So that's pretty much what this talk is about. How can I do at least the bare minimum to be secure? Because nowadays everything is connected to the internet, everything could be targeted, everything could ended up mining Bitcoin, and you don't even see it. So what are the bare minimum stuff that you can do on a budget on AWS? It won't cost you much. Most of them are not super hard to do it. So how you do that in an efficient way if you work with one of those 3 constraints, all of them. So yeah, how do you protect your business if you don't have time, if you don't have money, or if you don't have people? You hire me and I'll do it for you. No, kidding. So there's a lot of organizations and industries. They create standards. Like if you look online, you see like hundreds of different acronyms from different standards, and every one of them, they have their own standards, they have their own wording, and they are massive long. Like they are absurd. Last time I checked, the ISM/IRAP for government, if you look at the entire document, you have like 700 different controls, which is quite a lot of stuff. And you can imagine how long it will take to have all of them. So it's not easy. So there are some specific organizations. They created some like easier standards, like to be the entry level, like the bare minimum that you can have. So you can start from from specific place. You don't need to hit the ISO 27000 in your first go. You can go to those ones, so you have the bare minimum, and at least you won't get hacked in the next 6 months. And every day that pass, this becomes more and more important. If you put on the news like data breach, every day we'll see a different one, a different company being hacked and getting their data exposed. So yeah, it's becoming very, very important every day. And it becomes expensive, like the fees and the lawsuits and everything that's involved with a data breach. It's quite a lot of money. There were cases of companies going out of the business when they transitioned during lockdown to full remote work. They weren't prepared. They have to punch a lot of holes in their firewalls. They got compromised because they didn't have those processes or any other processes really. And they had to go out of business because the fees and everything they have to pay on lawsuits were more than what they actually earned. So they went for bankruptcy. And also in the past, I think this was before COVID, it's not related to COVID, but people already died because of cyber attack. Just curiosity, don't need to be worried. For example, in a hospital, if I'm not mistaken, in Canada, some people were connected to the life support machines. For some weird reason, those life support machines are now smart, which means they are connected to the internet, and they can be hacked. And weirdly enough, those machines run Windows 7, some of them. So doesn't require much to hack a Windows Server box. You can learn in half an hour on YouTube. Just search for like Windows 7 Metaxploit on YouTube. You'll find some nice tutorials, but do it for education purposes only. Going back to my slide from the tangent. So those are 3 organizations. They created standards. And those are the something is being hacked. So those are the basic standards from those organizations. CISA, it's an organization from the US government, and in theory it's only applicable for US agencies. But since they are so, they have like a good reputation and they are so known in the industry, a lot of companies adopt their standards. Same example was NIST. Probably you already heard about NIST. It comes from the same place. Australia has one as well. The Australian Cybersecurity Center created the Essential Weight, which is pretty much the for dummies version of the IRAP standard. so anyone can comply. And it's a starting point because they saw that going from 0 to IRAP compliant is extremely hard, and the agencies weren't getting there. So they created this one to be like a baseline, the basic bare minimum that you can have, and then you can build on top of it. The idea is not to get to hit perfect in the first go. You go to this one, you get this one done, and you see it's not hard, and then you move to the next one that is the full-blown standard. AWS as well, they have the well-architected framework, and inside the well-architected there's one standard, one pillar called security, and in this security pillar there's a lot of information that you can add, and you can grab from there, and it's based on NIST actually, so it comes from the same as CISA. Cool. So yeah, what are those? What are the recommendations? So those are pretty much, and I copy them from all the different standards and put in a simple wording that anyone can understand, because this is another problem. Security professionals, they usually speak with their own lingo in a very weird way. It's almost the same as speaking with lawyers, like you are both speaking the same language, but it's really hard to understand. So yeah, same thing happens with security professionals. So I translated these to simple wording. So yeah, what you can do to make the bare minimum for your environment to guarantee that at least you can prevent 95% of the attacks. Don't use weak encryption functions or cryptographic algorithms. What that means, if you store data, your user and pass in a database, don't use MD5 for the love of God. You can imagine how many of those I see every day. Or don't use like this for encryption, symmetric. That really doesn't work. Use the standards that everyone uses. It's not rocket science. Only if you have like extremely old application, but if you have, that's a different problem. You have more things to worry about. Second one, it's more common in small companies and startup. Don't build a flat network. I've seen one company actually recently. They have dev, non-prod, and prod all in one AWS account. All the instances in the same VPC. All of them interconnected. And everything was accessible for everything. So from everywhere. So you can imagine, like, don't do that. Split your environment into accounts. Go to AWS well architected and follow those things. Separate in different, split in different accounts, split in different VPCs, split prod and non-prod. Use least privilege and all those security lingo that people like to say, but research what they mean first. Restrict administrative privileges. Pretty much everywhere. It's the least what least privilege means. Pretty much. If you really don't need admin privileges, it's not great not having control. But how many times you had to be root in a specific instance, or even in your own laptop? It's really hard to push this. I don't really like, to be honest. But sometimes, like if you are a developer, yes, fine, you need to install a lot of different weird stuff every day. But other than you, developer, people don't necessarily need admin privileges in their laptops. For example, let's say sales, finance people, or non-technical consultants or anything like that. Why do you need admin? Like, why do you need to run a root script in your laptop? Probably only if you have like a very specific use case. Yeah, that's fine. We can talk about it. But most people, they won't even need it. It's just like one extra door that someone can jump in and compromise stuff. And just thinking about like a bad guy, they only need to find one flaw. Doesn't really matter which one. If they find one, it's golden. They have everything they need. So just block the most basic ones. So it gets their life harder. And usually, cyber criminals, they are lazy. They will go for the easiest target possible. So don't be the easiest target. That's the whole key point of this entire presentation. Follow the security principles, the ones that I mentioned. Segregation of duties, least privilege. What else? Can someone know one that I just got a blank here? Anyone wants to contribute? Never mind. I'll keep going then. Use MFA. That should be pretty much standard. But you'll be amazed how many companies they don't even have for the root account, for the root user for the root account. Like, it's absurd. So just use MFA everywhere. It's not hard. Doing the first configuration for all your accounts, it could be a little bit tricky, but after you have it configured, it will simply work. So you only have this problem once. So just do it right from the first time. Next one, be careful with insecure defaults. Some AWS services, they need to be easy so everyone can use. The barrier to of entry is lower, but they introduce some insecure defaults. In the past, long time ago, when you create an S3 bucket, it came public by default, and then you have to make it private. Now it's the other way around. So that way, it's secure default. AWS EC2, when you create an EC2 instance, if you don't change anything, it will be a public EC2 with port 80 and 22 open to the world, like 0.0.0.0/0. That's not a good standard. It's insecure by default because everyone has access. Yes, there are the controls, like there's the key pair that you need to use. It's not as easy to get, but there are ways to get it. So don't, like I said again, don't be the easiest target out there. And the list goes on. Like, all of them are pretty standard, pretty straightforward. Do your own backups. The next one, be careful with poor data transmission and storage methods. Companies, they spend a lot of money to like organize transmission protocols and transmission services, but people still can, like, it's impossible to prevent this. People can still export something from Confluence, for example, and send it to Slack to themselves so they can access from outside the company. That could be a problem. Or they can email to themselves, and the list goes on. Like, it's impossible to prevent all possible scenarios, so just do the right thing. Another one that is very important that DevOps people might not like it, document your process. Like, I know that in DevOps practices, documentation is not the most important thing, but at least have a bare minimum. So when someone new joins, they have an idea what is going on and how to work pretty much. So have at least a bare minimum. Patch your applications, patch your OSs, and do a little bit of hardening. Delete everything that's not necessary. If you only use, let's say, one language, you only code in one specific language, why do you need libraries and binaries for all languages that existed? Or, like, why do you need 5 versions of one specific thing if you only use one? Just delete old stuff, things that you don't need. Disable services that are not necessary. That way, again, you are not a target. And for the love of God, don't use Microsoft Office macros. I never seen anyone using that for a good purpose. Like, I only seen that for malware. I think Microsoft created this for malware, because, like, I never seen anyone. I can only do pie charts on Excel and a few search functions, no more than that. I have no idea why macros are there. Like, they are there just to be a vector for malware. So don't use it unless you have a very specific application that runs on Excel, for example, or you want to do like some fancy stuff on PowerPoint. But don't use macros. So yeah, I think that's pretty much. Just limit everything that is not necessary. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions or anything, just throw at me. I'll try to answer as best as I can, and have some links there if you want to see other stuff that I write about. And I also agree that Kubernetes is probably not the best option. I have an article for this. Go read it.
Cool. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Great.
No questions? Cool. Thank you, David.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, Dawn, you want to come get plugged in? Yes. Matt, are you able to help?
I'm guessing that you can all hear me? I can. Excellent. I regret to inform you that despite my constant protestations to the universe, I have not yet managed to grow a third hand. Let me just start everything up. Need to get it. Not that one. And now if we plug this in, one hopes that at some stage it will
Fingers crossed.
magically work. Although considering the earlier technical difficulties, that may be optimistic. There we go. All right. Well, for the second time, actually for the third time in 3 months, because I believe I did What's New in AWS last month, I am here again at the Melbourne AWS user group, and it is lovely to be here. Today, I'm going off my sort of standard beaten path of the governance, risk, and compliance services and other things along those lines that I generally come to rant to you about. And we are going to talk about using infrastructure as code tools to define ownership and responsibility across your organization. To begin with, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It would help, apologies to them, if I could actually pronounce that name properly, on whose land I am presenting tonight. This is and always will be Aboriginal land. Their sovereignty was never ceded. I'm hoping that, considering that this is my third time here in 3 months, most of the audience knows who I am. But for those of you who have not met me before, my name is Dawn. I do cloud security and DevOps type work at Enabler, and we are hiring, so I'm sure you'll be hearing from me again in the marketplace segment. What probably pretty much no one here knows about me, though, is that I am the child of 2 PhD holders. It's probably not immediately apparent what being the child of 2 PhD holders has to do with defining infrastructure as code across your organization. For that, I would say to you all that being the child of 2 PhD holders and having read their PhDs teaches you the value in repeatable experiments and in being able to validate your findings in multiple scenarios. Outside of work, I am an occasional author and kitchen alchemist. Sometimes that ends really well, sometimes it doesn't. I'm also a raging sports ball fan, and I am taking a break from the hockey garb, which has been common recently, and we're going with New England Patriots football gear instead today. So back to that thing about being the child of 2 PhDs. The reason why it is relevant for this talk is because although what I'm talking about is infrastructure as code tools, this is predicated on a concept called Conway's Law, which, as the name would suggest, was invented by a gentleman called Conway. A paraphrase of what this is about is to say that Conway's Law is the maxim that an organization will always design tools, software, products, whatever, which reflect the organization's structure. And that means that by first principles, if you want to design yourself a system, you have to start by designing the structures that are going to build it. You have to design the people which are going to build it. You have to design an architecture of teams, an architecture of reporting, which will enable you to actually build what you want to build. And as befits my parents and their PhDs, Conway's Law has actually been validated in multiple academic settings by researchers who have gone and looked at big companies such as Microsoft, and they found that generally this maxim holds true. So why is it that org structure matters? This is significant, or my take on this at least is significantly less researched than the fact that it does. But the first thing that I would call out here is that if teams actually talk to each other, they're going to work much faster, and the work that they're going to produce is generally going to be a lot better. When you have people sitting alone in silos developing things, there's often a lot of information in people's heads which is not cross-pollinating. And if that information were cross-pollinating, it would potentially speed up the work that you were trying to do. A colleague of mine at Enabler called Colin Little, really great guy,
wrote a blog post for us a while back talking about the idea of platform teams. Colin and I also worked together at a previous job, and both of us were at various times part of the platform team there. And one takeaway that he called out in that blog post, which I absolutely agree with, is that the paradigm of the platform team, which is one which is sort of becoming much more common now, it means that if you have people who are maintaining your baseline, you free up the dev teams to get work done. If every team is managing their own Kubernetes cluster, and I know that Kubernetes is becoming a bit of a shtick here, but that means that 95% of their time is going to be taken up actually managing the infra to make sure that it's working. Even if it is Kubernetes, if you can centralize that all in one place and have a group of specialists managing it, then all that the people who are deploying to it need to know is about what they need to do to deploy. And those dedicated support people are inherently going to reduce blockers. They are going to reduce lead times. Because when you have a problem that's not in your domain, if you've got dedicated support people who can help you with it, you're not smashing your head repeatedly against a brick wall. You can go to them, interact with them, and that will enable you to get things done quicker. And ultimately, this idea of sort of cross-functional working groups ends up being a bit fallacious a lot of the time, because they're not consistent and they're often arranged on an ad hoc basis. If you have a simple and appropriate team structure, which kind of matches the size and the scale of your organization, in the end, what you're going to end up with is a simpler final product. For large organizations, some degree of complexity is inherent to their structure. But if you can work out how to harness that complexity in the correct way, it will allow you to produce software which is ultimately much more simple. So this brings me to the question of how to architect a company, but as those of you who've seen all of my talks would know, it's probably better described as how not to architect a company. Because a lot of the companies that are around, even big companies, even companies like AWS, once upon a time were a bunch of people in a shed or a bunch of people working for another company who eventually got spun off into their own structure. And if you do not think about solution architecture and design architecture for your organization, what you end up doing is building complexity in on the fly. You scale, but you don't necessarily scale in a way that's going to keep you running at the same velocity when you're 10 times or 100 times bigger. And what a lot of that complexity tends to come in the form of are siloed teams that don't have a central support structure. You need to scale, you spin up another team to run it. But then you've got that problem of a whole bunch of redundant work is being done. There's information in multiple people's heads. Everyone has various different pieces of the jigsaw, but you can't put together the puzzle until you get all of them together. So they have to go and find the bits themselves. The other fallacy, which I think is slightly less common, but I'm aware of a few examples of this in the wild, is when you get really deep team-based hierarchies. So rather than 1 or 2 levels, you've got 4 or 5. You've got different levels of teams that are building complexity on top of each other. And what will tend to happen there is you lose critical information in communication. If you've got one group of people that are building the infrastructure, and then you've got another group of people that are building on top of that, and a third group that's building on top of that, and then a fourth group that's finally building your application. How does the information that the application team need from the people who are building that core infrastructure get through those layers of hierarchy? And again, as befits my talks at the AWS user group, once again, we are going to return to my favorite case study, and that is our friends at Product Core and their newly acquired subsidiary, Fly Money. I'm not going to do the full introduction because I'm sure that most of you have met Product Core and Fly Money by now. But we're talking here about 2 startups. Product Core builds primarily e-commerce software, and they have 2 flagship products, Buy It and Sell It. They run everything on AWS. And the reason why they bought Fly Money is because they were paying a significant amount of money to a payments processor to handle all of the payments on their purchasing software, and they decided that they needed to cut out the middleman. And we have, anyone who has seen my Product Core talks before will also have met the wonderful Ben Nguyen. They are Product Core's head of engineering, and they have over 10 years of experience, mainly in the venue of startups. To be honest, given how long I've been giving these talks, it's probably up near 15 now. But one thing that's really important to understand about Ben and the way that they approach things is that they're very passionate about improving infrastructure. And they're very well aware that part of what comes out of that is it's not just about improving infrastructure. You have to improve the structures that people are working in to enable them to build better things. Which leads us to taking a few steps back as we've sort of seen this acquisition unfold. Let me tell you a story about the first meeting of minds. This is when Ben got all of the employees of Fly Money's engineering department into a room, and they had a clash with meetings. So they got everyone in the room and they said, what I want you to do while I'm gone for these 15 minutes to take this critical call is sit down and draw me out an org chart. You know, I've heard about how your company operates, but what I really want to understand is from your point of view, what do you see as the structure of the organization? So get together, draw that out, and I'll be back in 15 minutes. Ben came back 15 minutes later to not one org chart, but one org chart per person. And the real kicker here, which shows you just how dysfunctional Fly Money is that there were absolutely no similarities between any of these 20-some org charts. In fact, the one that turned out to be the most accurate was the one which just had the employee's name on it and then drew out a chart with a bunch of question marks all over the place. So as we can see from this, this is not really a company that has any sort of functioning structure. And this brings me to the question of what Fly Money's initial infrastructure actually looked like. Because the art of defining repeatable infrastructure is something that's, I mean, it's a fine art. If you do it well, it helps you to increase your velocity, but it's actually really, really difficult to do. So the question there becomes who's actually responsible for things. And this is my entirely anecdotal opinion on one particular model of responsibility that I have seen work very well when you're dealing with infrastructure as code. So what you essentially have here is you have two groups of people. You have people who are in central teams, which are responsible for each core component of the platform. And that might be people who are responsible for AWS. It might be people who are responsible for your ECS Fargate. It might be people who are responsible for your Kubernetes or maintaining things like your central security. But that might also be people who deal with other vendors, people who are responsible for provisioning for things like your GitHub or your GitLab, people who are responsible for provisioning other tools which are very important for you to be able to use and keeping them up to date. And then you have the dev teams who are actually building the software on top of this. They've got the core platform. They don't need to be able to necessarily see under the hood of how all of that is working. All that they care about is that it works and that they have someone that they can go to talk about it if they're running into any issues. So your central teams are responsible for building and architecting those core components, getting everyone in a room, deciding how it should run, and then setting it up. They're also responsible for providing some sort of pattern that dev teams can consume to allow them to use the software. And if you're talking about a Git provider, that's probably going to be very simple. But if you're talking about some sort of platform built on AWS, whether that be just a basic account structure or whether it be that you're actually providing a lot of the building blocks to people, it's going to need to be significantly more complex. You can't rely on dev teams being able to understand CloudFormation defined in YAML. And finally, they're responsible for meeting internal SLAs. So they are responsible for being able to go to the dev teams and say, we expect this to be up this amount of time, architect your software accordingly, and then this will inform the SLAs that you give to other businesses. When you're talking to salespeople, when you're talking to marketing people, these are the baselines you're working from, and then you build in your own Slack. And the dev teams are responsible for taking those core patterns and customizing them to their use case. It might be that they're basically usable out of the box, or it might be that there's a significant amount of customization that needs to happen on top. And they are also responsible for automated and reliable testing and deployment of their applications. And this is absolutely critical. Although the core infra is only as good as the infrastructure as code and the processes that define it, the same is true for the application. An application is only as good as the automation and reliability of the testing and deployment process. You do not want to be picking up your major issues in manual UAT testing. even though manual UAT testing is still something that you should be doing. And then we have a bunch of different tools which we can leverage to do all of this. Infrastructure provisioning tools, which are the ones that we would generally actually use to set up stuff on AWS, fall into two buckets. You've got ones which are declarative, where you just write down what you want and it spits it out. And you've got ones which are programmatic, where you can set up functionality, feed it some information, and it will generate it for you. So we're obviously in AWS land right now. Your main declarative tool is going to be CloudFormation. If for some reason you're using Azure day-to-day and you're here at an AWS meetup, well, first off, kudos to you, but what you're looking for there are ARM templates. And if, as is more likely, you're working in a multi-cloud environment or a hybrid cloud environment, the tools which are open source to at least a degree, which you can use in any scenario, are going to be your Pulumis and your Terraforms. There's always utility in being able to understand how these work, but it's also very important if you're working somewhere like a big bank or an emergency services provider, where they need to actually run things on multiple clouds to provide a level of redundancy. A whole bunch of fallacies around those sorts of things being multi-cloud or hybrid cloud. They're not. You cannot take the configuration from one cloud and immediately plug it into another. But if you understand how to write Terraform for AWS, you understand how to write Terraform for Azure or GCP. And programmatically, you've got our very own AWS CDK, which HashiCorp have built on to provide the CDK for Terraform. These basically take really common programming languages, you define constructs, you tell them what you want, and they will generate the declarative template for you. This is really, really powerful, although it comes with one or two major downsides. The other big bucket that you've got here, which are the ones that are sort of falling out of favor, are the config management tools. And there are 4.5 of these that are very commonly used. The 4 are Ansible, Chef, Puppet, and Salt. And what these allow you to do is to basically define a list of changes that you want to make to your server, and then the config management tool will go away and make them. The reason why these are slowly becoming obsolete is because the most repeatable way to do config management is to actually build it into a container image so that you don't have to go away and manually do it on each server. So how does this all apply to Fly Money? Well, those of you who heard the disaster recovery presentation 2 months ago would know that they had some of their infrastructure as code partially defined in Terraform, but they've also got a whole bunch of it defined in CLI scripts. So what you've essentially got there is very similar to the config management tool, an imperative list of instructions that go, hey, go away on my server and do this, rather than a declarative template that says, for this particular structure, I want you to get it to this end state. What's worse is that because Fly Money's org chart is dysfunctional at best and non-existent at worst, about 60% of the work that's being done there is repeatable. You don't need to invent the wheel on how to deploy an EC2 instance 5 times. If you can find one pattern that works for deploying one, that will get you to where you want to be. And their config management, contrary to the current common paradigm, is all done with Ansible and Chef. But the real kicker here is the bulk of their resources, so about 55%, are not actually defined anywhere at all. Someone has just gone in on the console, created these, and not thought to make them automatable. So Ben's main question here is, if I am going to wrangle Fly Money's organizational state to a functional state where everything is going to work, which tools do I want to use where and when to make sure that the separation of concerns is clearly defined? And there are a few considerations here around how you want to actually get your org to run. The paradigm which Ben is going to use, and the one which I've presented to you tonight, is a very, very simple one, where you have one level down the bottom of a platform team or some similarly named team that performs the same function of managing some degree of core infrastructure which people are going to share. And they also manage the idea of providing repeatable patterns to people, which they can go away and reuse. There are other ways of architecting your organization which work perfectly well, but this is a simple paradigm which scales very well and will generally work in most situations. So in terms of the actual separation of concerns, you've got a few different levels at which you can do this. At the very basic level for AWS, you're looking at your accounts and you're looking at your role-based access control. On top of that, you're then going to build shared platforms, and that might be your VPC and networking structure. It might be your Fargate clusters, your ECS clusters. It might be your Kubernetes clusters. It might be that you're building in some level of shared platform that's based around something like CloudFront, if a lot of what you're doing is related to content delivery, particularly if you're running static websites. It might be that it's entirely serverless, and you've got some level of shared platform which you're building on something like API Gateway, where you expect everyone to consume one, and not each individual area of the company to set up their own. And from those shared platforms, you want to build out reusable patterns, which people can then take and can actually, in the dev teams, they can be responsible for managing and deploying their own infrastructure and customizing it to the specific use case that you're looking at without them needing to know about everything that they need to do. So then you've got the app infra on top of that, and on top of the app infra, those dev teams are going to need to worry to some degree about how they do config management. So once Ben manages to wrangle FlyMoney setup into a reasonable state, what they end up with is a central platform team which is using CloudFormation for all of the resources that they deploy. The advantage of this is that it's declarative. It sets out everything in one particular way. It is native to AWS, which is the only tool that Product Core and FlyMoney use. And at the end of the day, it is also the one that has the most known bugs, which are generally the least impactful. Part of the reason why they chose not to use CDK for this infrastructure is that CDK doesn't actually have a native way of detecting drift. You have to do that at the CloudFormation level once CDK has finished generating CloudFormation templates for you. And when you're dealing with building shared infrastructure like VPCs, that can be quite bad. So what you're looking for with the account level configuration and that sort of shared layer is you want to do it in the simplest manner possible. And unless you're dealing with a bunch of people who understand code very well, it's highly likely that that way of doing it is going to be declarative. You may also find that for what you want to build, something like CDK is actually more powerful for your account level config. In that case, go away and use that. But where the tools like CDK, those functional infrastructure as code tools, really come into their own is at the next layer, and those are the patterns that the platform team at Product Core / FlyMoney is going to build out, the patterns which everyone across the organization are going to be able to consume. And that basically abstracts a whole lot of the work away from dev teams. Rather than giving them massive declarative files which they then have to be able to understand and parse YAML to use, you give them very small reusable constructs with sensible defaults built in that you can entirely abstract away. So the real power in a tool like CDK is in that particular area: patterns, reusable code, application infrastructure. You build it once, you go and give it to 10 different teams, and 10 different teams can then build on top of it rather than having to go and architect it on their own. When you actually finish building that infra, and once the dev teams have finished what they're what they're building, and they're now trying to deploy things, your next layer, which generally comes into play at the CI/CD point, becomes your config management. And for every dev team at FlyMoney, for every dev team in any org, what's critical here is not to go, there is one perfect tool for this. What's critical is to recognize that config management methods all have different trade-offs. There are scenarios where it is going to be ideal to use something like an Ansible, a Chef, or a Puppet if you want to build on top of a very, very basic container image or a bare operating system and make changes in one scenario. But if you're deploying that same code to, 22 now? I think it's 22 with Jakarta, different AWS regions. There's a significant amount of time that goes into having to run that on each server. And you end up with a scenario where a lot of those different environments, as you build on them, are going to drift from each other. So that's a scenario where you'd want to be doing the vast majority, if not all of your config, in the actual container image, and anything which is specific to your environment, rather than doing it using a config management tool, you call out for it. So the decision there as a dev team at the dev level is basically decide which trade-offs you're willing to accept. Are you willing to accept that you might have to bake an image for 3 hours, but then you're deploying it out to 22 different regions and that will take you 5 minutes? Or do you really want to just run off a base image and do most of that configuration in one place, in one location, using one of those config management tools? And that is the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, I am happy to field them now. Contacts otherwise are up on the slides, and if you want to explore the previous history of Product Core, there is also a link there to the GitHub repository that has all of the talks that I have done here before in video form, as well as sources for some of them and transcripts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Did anybody have any questions for Dawn? We are a quiet audience tonight, aren't we?
I can see one.
Those resources, the resources that Ben Ewan has to deal with, which were manually created in the console, what tools are available for him to pull those into his infrastructure as code platforms?
It depends on what sort of resources they are, and it depends on what sort of infrastructure as code you're doing.
IAM resources, lots of them.
Yeah, the one that I know the answer to this best for is actually Terraform, because Terraform has an import functionality where you can basically give it, and depending on the resource, it'll be an ARN or an identifier or an alias. You can basically go, I have this Terraform stack, I have defined this Terraform stack locally, Terraform import this resource, and Terraform will then go away, import it into the stack. And because Terraform does detect drift, it will then go and do change management against it. I actually have not done this in CloudFormation for many, many years. I know that there's a facility in CloudFormation to create a stack from existing resources. But for CloudFormation specifically, and for the CDK type things, go away, research what the current method of doing it is. I don't know for CDK. I know for CloudFormation you have that import functionality when you actually build the stack. For Terraform it's easy, you can just do it on the fly.
Thanks.
Were there any other questions? Yep. Just wait a second. Bring the thing. Get my steps up.
There's a tool you can use called CloudFormer, I think, which can import, written by Ian in Sydney, Ian McKay.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so that might be useful.
Yeah, definitely anything that Ian has written I would absolutely endorse. But yeah, that would also tend to suggest that the functionality for CloudFormation natively is not quite there. So if you're looking to, that's actually another fair point there. If you're looking to import a bunch of resources and you don't have that existing platform, maybe that's actually a compelling use case for Terraform if you've already got stuff, because Terraform will let you readily do those imports on the fly. And that's part of the trade-off that you get with all of those sorts of things. I couldn't cover it all in 20 minutes, but there are a lot of different scenarios which will lead you to one of these tools over the other, depending on what it is you're actually doing.
Were there any other questions? No, thank you very much, Dawn.
Cool, I will.
I'm going to give that to you once I sit down, if that's okay.
Cool, thank you again, Dawn. So we have our marketplace segment now, just before we wrap up. Let's see if my updated slides actually work. Yay! Okay, so marketplace, if you are looking to hire people or if you are looking for work, if you're looking for work, pay attention to what's about to happen. If you are looking to hire people, go pop your hand up. We'll see how many there are. Lots of people looking to hire, of course. All right, so what happens is I'll bring the mic around. Please say who you are, where you work, the type of people you're looking for. And then if you are looking for work, please pay attention to them and go and harass who you think is the best, I guess. Also, we'll go left to right.
Thanks. Yeah, I mentioned last month, my name's Thomas, I work for 4 Quarters. I'm actually one of those recruiters that sends loads of emails, so apologies on everyone's behalf. I do work in the cloud space, AWS, and Dawn mentioned it earlier, Azure, if you are here. I'm recruiting in contract and perm at the moment, so yeah, feel free to come and see me at the end. Also, just want to say, if anyone needs any help with CVs, interviews, or anything like that when it comes to recruitment, I'm actually quite good at it. So yeah, feel free to come and say hello. All right, thanks guys.
G'day everyone. You can hear me right? Yep. My name's Billy O'Connor. I'll move across for you guys here. I work at a consultancy called Rubik's. We're a data pure play, so we only do data work. Essentially, we're looking for any data engineers, data strategists, any data scientists, data analysts. If you're interested in that kind of space, I'll be around here tonight for maybe next 15 minutes after the thing's done. Come say good day. And yeah, we're hiring.
Cool. I can't tell it's on, but I'll just speak. Hi everyone, I'm Yas, another recruiter from Reese Group, and I know like when you hear the name Reese, you're probably thinking, oh, that's that plumbing company that does something. But we are like so much more than that. We've been around for almost like 100 years. We're a pretty big organization. We have a really big tech side of the business called Reese Tech. So we're currently hiring for, I don't have one position to highlight. We've got multiple positions in the cloud space, engineering space, security space. So if you're looking for a new role, just have a chat with me. Even if you have certain visa restrictions or anything like that, we are more than happy to sponsor you. So yeah, thank you.
So more people just in here? Just pop your hands up for me again so I can see. Sorry, Ryan, should have done sponsors first. Whoops.
That's it. Hey everyone, I'm Arjen, in case you missed that at the start. I work for CMD, in case you missed that at the start, or during David's talk. We're a consultancy, we're always looking for people. Obviously, our greatest attraction is you get to work with David. So, who doesn't want to do that? Aside from that, we're just a great company. We're looking for people at all levels. I give this talk every month, so I'm not going to repeat everything again. I'm here. Come talk to me or David, who didn't know I was going to say that. So, thanks.
Hey, I'm Emily from CEVO. We are one of the sponsors. We are obviously AWS Advanced Consultancy Partner. At the moment, we are recruiting across all of our pillars, specifically looking for devs, anyone with data experience, DevOps, pretty much anything AWS we are looking for at the moment. In particular, data, we are screaming out for data engineers. So if you're keen and you want to join a culture and work across different verticals, it's a really good space to be in. So feel free to hit me up if you have any questions or just want some advice on what the market looks like. I'm happy to have a chat.
Hey everyone. Oh, there we are. Hey everyone. I'm Phoebe. I work at Altus Consulting. It's a small consulting firm. We don't just do AWS, we do Azure, GCP, everything. We're looking for data people across all levels. We're in Melbourne, Sydney, New Zealand, London. So if you want to travel, move to a different country, like you can do that too. Yeah, come have a chat to me if you're interested.
Look, to be honest, I'm hoping that by this point my talks probably sell Enabler as well as the marketplace pitches do. But Enabler is a really, really good place to work. One of the reasons why I enjoy working there is if you're looking to get into doing things like talking, coming and presenting at meetups, there is a massive amount of support for that. The minor downside to probably a lot of people here is we do a lot with Kubernetes, but if you're interested in the Kubernetes type thing, AWS, GCP, and you're interested in working with people who will support you to come out and do the sort of stuff that I do, then come and find me at the end.
Thank you, Dawn. Did I miss anybody? No more hands that I can see? All right. So yeah, if you are looking, or if any of that interested you, please go and grab them after the after the event. We do also have the jobs channel on Slack, and I would encourage everybody who put their hand up tonight to post there if you haven't already. It's a great way to reach the 900 or so others who are actually online and not in the room with us tonight. All right, where's my thing? So a big thank you to David and to Dawn for presenting tonight, as well as to Ian and Matt for running the news segment, and to our sponsors, CMD, Versant, and Civo, if we give them a round of applause for that. Our next event is the last Wednesday of the month again, surprise, in July the 27th, I believe. I'm always nervous when I put this slide up because I have a habit of getting the wrong date wrong, but it's last Wednesday of the month, always. And we'll be back here again. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you next month.